One of the clubs you support will be gone in 5 years. Not struggling, not in a bit of bother, gone, expelled, wound up, or rebuilt from scratch in an amateur league. And the worst part is, the signs are already out there, sitting in public records that almost nobody ever checks. So here's what this video is. 5 specific warning signs that a football club is heading toward collapse, counting down to the one that matters most. Not vague stuff like they're losing money. Every club below the championship is losing money. I mean the 5 concrete, verifiable signals that show up before a club dies every single time. You can check your own club tonight for free in about 10 minutes. I'll tell you exactly how. I've been through the case files on Bury, Macclesfield, and Parma, 3 very different clubs in 2 different countries, and the same fingerprints show up across all of them. We'll use those cases throughout. And I want to flag something early that I'll come back to at the end, because it's the piece of this that almost nobody talks about. There's a rule inside English football that means when a club collapses, the local printer, the caterer, the coach company, the small businesses that kept the club running get almost nothing, while the players get paid in full. That rule exists, it's legal, and it's one of the most morally loaded facts in this entire topic. We'll get there. So we're counting down from 5 to 1, and number 5 is where I'm starting because this one is the earliest warning anyone ever gets, and it's almost never covered. Non-playing staff get paid late first. Not the players, the canteen workers, the ground staff, the woman who runs the club shop. These are the people who miss wages months before a single player sees a delayed payslip. And because fans aren't watching for that signal, because we're all trained to panic when we hear players haven't been paid, by the time the player story breaks, you're already deep into the crisis. The early window has closed. At Macclesfield Town, players went on strike in November 2019 over non-payment of wages, and that's the moment most fans remember. But the financial rot at that club had been visible for years before anyone with a shirt on refused to play. The club were forced to field a mixture of youth team players and loanees in their FA Cup first-round tie after the first team refused to play, having not been paid on time. That's a dramatic headline, but the quieter version of that story, the groundskeeper who's chasing 3 months of wages, the stadium staff being told next week, definitely next week, that's the version that happens first, and it happens in the dark. At Parma, it was the same pattern on a grander scale. Players and staff had not been paid since the summer, and many creditors had waited longer than that. The staff story came first, the player story came later and louder. By then, the team bus had already been repossessed and $400,000 of medical and gymnasium equipment was gone in a bailiff's van. So what do you actually look for? Talk to people who work at the club if you can. Watch local football journalism, not the national stuff, the local reporter who covers every game and knows the groundsman by name. And pay attention to whether the club is running unusual fundraisers, selling season tickets earlier than normal, or putting out vague statements about cash flow challenges. Those are the tells. The player wage story is not the warning, it's the confirmation. Now sign 4, and this one is boring on purpose because that's exactly why it works. Accounts are filed late or auditors and directors resign. Every UK company has to file accounts at Companies House. It's public, it's free, and football clubs are no different. When a club starts missing its filing deadlines, or when the auditors sign off with a going concern warning buried in the notes, or when a director quietly resigns, that's information, real information, and almost no fan ever looks at it. Here's what you do. Go to Companies House, find an update.companyinformation.gov.uk, search your club's name, and click on Filing History. You're looking for 3 things. Are accounts being filed on time? Are there any charges registered against the club's assets? And who are listed as persons of significant control? This takes about 8 minutes. Most fans have never done it once. Macclesfield Town Football Club Limited, company registration number 00415853, was wound up by the High Court, and in the year before that, the club had been a regular recipient of charges from the English Football League for breaches of EFL regulations. All of that was trackable. The charges, the sanctions, the filing history, it was there. Those sanctions and the financial conduct that resulted in them contributed to the relegation of Macclesfield to the National League. The spiral was documented in public records the whole way down. Director resignations matter too. When the people with legal responsibility for the club start leaving, especially when they leave quickly and quietly without a public explanation, that's a signal that something inside the accounts is bad enough that they don't want their name attached to it anymore. One resignation might be personal. 2 in a short window is a pattern. And here's the thing about auditors. When they add a material uncertainty note or a going concern qualification to the accounts, they're essentially saying on paper that they're not sure this company will still be operating in 12 months. That note is public. It's in the filing. Nobody reads it. Go check your club right now if you want. Pause this, open a tab, search company's house, and then come back, because sign number 1, the single strongest predictor of collapse, is still coming. I haven't got there yet. Sign 3. The club was bought for a nominal sum. Barry were rescued from bankruptcy by Stuart Day and subsequently sold to Steve Dale in late 2018 for £1. £1. That is not a sale. That is an escape. When a seller accepts £1 for a football club, they are not selling an asset. They are paying to get out from under the liability. The club has become such a burden that the previous owner is essentially giving it away to avoid the legal and financial consequences of keeping it. And the buyer? Dale bought the club for £1 in December 2018, putting it up for sale only 5 months later. Barry's demise would appear to demonstrate he did not have the funds to ensure he could operate the club as a professional football club. So when someone pays nothing for a club, they have nothing to lose. There's no skin in the game, no investment they're protecting. If things go wrong, they can walk away with the same amount they put in, which is nothing. Parma was eventually sold for a solitary €1. And then, this is the part that should have been the alarm, the ownership of Parma changed hands for the sum of €1 for the second time since December. The previous owners, a Russian Cypriot conglomerate, had bought the club from major shareholder Tommaso Gahardi just 2 months back. Nobody wanted it. Everyone was trying to hand the problem to someone else. A succession of ownership changes led to eventual bankruptcy in March 2015, with debts of around £378 million, as well as months of unpaid salaries. So when you hear that your club has been sold, the first question to ask is not who are the new owners, it's what did they pay. If the answer is a nominal sum, a pound, a euro, a token figure, treat that as a serious warning sign, not a curiosity.
Number 2. Ownership runs through opaque holding companies. This is the structural problem that makes everything else harder to fix. When a club is owned through a chain of holding companies, shell entities, offshore registrations, no clear ultimate beneficial owner, it becomes almost impossible to know who is actually responsible for the club's finances. Go back to Companies House. Look at the persons of significant control for your club. If the listed entity is another company, not a person, follow that chain. Who owns that company? Where is it registered? If the answer leads you to an address in a jurisdiction known for opacity, or if the chain has more than 2 or 3 layers with no named individual at the top, that's a problem. This isn't about assuming bad intent. Some legitimate ownership structures are genuinely complex, but when a club is in financial difficulty and the ownership is opaque, it means creditors, fans, and regulators can't easily establish who is liable for the debts. It slows everything down. It makes rescue harder, and it means the people who actually control the money can be very difficult to reach when things start collapsing. Before I get to sign number 1, I want to drop the thing I promised you at the top, the rule that barely gets discussed, the football creditors rule. When a football club goes into administration or insolvency, all football-related creditors are given priority over non-football creditors, such as HMRC, suppliers, and small businesses before the club can be readmitted into the league. In plain English, players, other clubs, and football governing bodies get paid first. The local sandwich company, the kit printer, the coach hire firm, they go to the back of the queue. One of the most notable examples of this rule in action was when Portsmouth went into administration during the 2009-10 season. St. John's Ambulance saw its $2,702 debt unpaid, while the club settled its football-related debts to other clubs and former players, totaling more than $20 million. Think about that. St. John's Ambulance, a charity providing first aid at the ground, got nothing, while transfer fees got settled in full. That's not a bug in the system. That's the system working exactly as designed. The typical headline-grabbing question is whether millionaire footballers should be paid their wages in full, whilst the St. John's Ambulance may only get pennies for a debt they are owed. And the answer, under current rules, is yes. Under English Football League regulations, a club entering administration is subject to a 12-point deduction, which creates a brutal spiral. You enter administration because you're broke, you lose 12 points, you're now more likely to be relegated, relegation cuts your revenue, which deepens the debt. Those sanctions contributed to the relegation of Macclesfield to the National League, which then cut the income they needed to survive. This is exactly why Barry's collapse mattered beyond Barry. The Football Governance Act of 2025 marks a transformative shift in sports governance, introducing a statutory regulator for English football. Barry's expulsion in 2019 fed directly into the fan-led review of football governance that pushed for exactly this kind of independent oversight. One club's collapse changed the rules of the game. That's the payoff beyond the doom. Number 1. Now, sign number 1, the strongest predictor, the thing that almost always shows up in the case files before everything else. The ground isn't owned by the club. Specifically, the stadium has been moved into a separate company, often owned by the same people as the club, through a sale and leaseback arrangement. The club sells its ground, its only real hard asset, to a related entity, pockets the cash, and then starts paying rent to its own owner. From the outside, nothing looks different. The team still plays there, but the club has just given up the one thing that any buyer, administrator, or rescue consortium could use as collateral. Stuart Day's biggest misstep at Barry were his actions in respect to Gig Lane. He mortgaged the stadium, and at the time of the failed last-minute sale, the lender was owed $3.7 million. With interest accruing daily, this proved to be a non-starter for potential buyers of the club. The ground was encumbered. Any rescue attempt had to deal with that debt first. It made saving Barry almost structurally impossible because the one asset that could anchor a deal had already been leveraged out. In November 2020, Barry went into administration again, and in May 2021, the club's Gig Lane ground was put on for sale. The ground and the club ended up separated, which is exactly the outcome that sale and leaseback structures make more likely. This is the sign that matters most because it's the one that removes the safety net. Every other sign on this list, late wages, dodgy ownership, nominal sales, those are serious, but they can potentially be fixed with new investment, a CVA, a rescue buyer. When the ground is gone or mortgaged to the hilt, the rescue math changes completely. There's nothing left to sell. There's nothing for a buyer to take on and turn around. The club becomes a liability with no asset attached to it, and that's when administrators start looking at liquidation instead of rescue. Go back to Companies House. Look at the charges registered against your club. A charge is a legal claim on an asset, like a mortgage on a property. If you see a charge registered against the club's ground, click on it. Find out who holds it, when it was registered, and whether it's been satisfied. If the ground appears in the filing history as having been transferred to a separate company, search that company too. Find out who owns it. Here's the honest caveat, and I'm going to give it to you straight. Some clubs show 3 or 4 of these signs and survive. Fan ownership groups step in. A genuine investor appears. A local council provides emergency support. The signs don't guarantee collapse. They indicate elevated risk. What they do is tell you that the margin for error has shrunk, and that one bad season, one failed transfer, one HMRC winding up petition could be the thing that tips it. The clubs that have gone under weren't uniquely unlucky. A confluence of factors and events led Barry to that point, particularly poor governance on behalf of both the owners and the EFL. The signs were there, they were public, they were boring, and because they were boring, nobody looked. If this video did what it was supposed to do, you now know more about your club's financial structure than 95% of the fans who watch them every week. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and thank you for spending some time with me. See you in the next one.